Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we are diving into something absolutely explosive. We're going to unpack a massive, newly declassified cache of intelligence documents straight from the United States government regarding the origins of COVID-19. Whether you've been following this story religiously since 2020, or you're just now catching up, we are about to get an unprecedented behind-the-scenes look at global intelligence. Let's get right into it.
It all really boils down to this one monumental question. Where did COVID-19 actually come from? And, maybe more importantly, what exactly did U.S. intelligence know, and when did they know it? The stakes here literally couldn't be higher. We're talking about a pandemic that changed the world forever. And as you'll see, the arguments happening behind closed doors in the intelligence community were every bit as fierce as the ones happening in public.
Okay, let's map out our investigation really quickly. We're going to start with the ODNI document dump. Check out the CIA's updated stance, assess the Wuhan lab, follow the trail of U.S. funding, dig into some wild whistleblower allegations, and finally, look at the persistent global divide.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the ODNI document dump.
So the whole reason we have this information right now is outgoing Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. She just authorized the declassification of nearly 400 pages of records, and it came with a highly charged press release. DNI Gabbard stated, quote, "The tactics used to hide the truth are straight from the deep state playbook. Politicized, self-serving leaders like Dr. Fauci covered up their own wrongdoing, manipulated intelligence, lied to Congress." Now, it's really important to point out that we are simply reporting the exact words from the ODNI's official release here, which directly points the finger at former NIAID Director Anthony Fauci regarding his influence over these intelligence assessments.
As you might expect, the political reaction to this was instant. Republican Senator Tom Cotton, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, commended the release and took a very hard-line stance. He said, "Now, the most important thing is to make China pay for unleashing a plague on the world." This just goes to show how completely intertwined the science of this virus is with domestic politics and international relations.
Which brings us right to Section 2, the CIA's updated stance.
For the longest time, the Central Intelligence Agency just couldn't agree on a single theory, but a major shift has happened. A classified review was ordered by the Biden administration, and former CIA Director William Burns tasked the agency with looking at all the data again. The result? This newly declassified, updated assessment on COVID-19 origins, which was released by current CIA Director John Ratcliffe.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, the CIA now officially assesses with low confidence that a research-related origin, meaning a lab leak, is more likely than a natural origin. Now we need to translate some intelligence speak here. There is no new, undeniable smoking gun. The agency is leaning toward a lab origin based on the overall picture. But that low confidence rating, that means they openly acknowledge the evidence is still incomplete or even contradictory.
Now let's look at how this splits up the rest of the U.S. intelligence community, because it's basically a giant puzzle. The FBI says lab leak with moderate confidence. The Department of Energy and now the CIA say lab leak with low confidence. But on the flip side, several other agencies, including the National Intelligence Council, still lean toward a natural origin, also with low confidence. So while the major heavy hitters are pointing to a lab leak, we definitely don't have a unified consensus yet.
Moving on to Section 3, assessing the Wuhan lab.
Now, what's really fascinating here is why these agencies lean toward a lab leak in the first place. Very early on, in May 2020, a declassified assessment from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory laid out 4 scientific conditions necessary for a lab release. First, the Wuhan lab had access to related bat viruses. Second, they had the reverse genetics capabilities to actually modify them. Third, they were running experiments on human ACE2 receptors, which is what the virus binds to in our bodies. And fourth, there were documented biosafety failures. Basically, the lab had all the ingredients perfectly in place for potential release.
And the declassified emails? They show U.S. analysts practically tearing their hair out debating the actual biology of the virus. They were incredibly focused on this thing called a furin cleavage site. It's a genetic feature that makes the virus highly infectious to humans, but it's not found in closely related natural bat coronaviruses. The analysts were actively questioning, wait, is this the result of human manipulation through gain-of-function research?
This leads us directly into a super highly scrutinized topic. Section 4, U.S. funding and eco-health.
So what exactly was America's relationship to the research happening over in Wuhan? Well, declassified EcoHealth Alliance grant documents show exactly that. They explicitly detail U.S. taxpayer-funded research into bat coronaviruses in China. And here's the kicker. They note that work on these viruses was highly cost-effective, specifically because it was done under biosafety level 2 conditions. For context, BSL-2 is way less secure than the maximum containment BSL-4 labs you usually think of for this kind of stuff.
Let's actually follow the money trail for a second based on these documents. The National Institutes of Health, the NIH, gave millions of dollars to the US-based EcoHealth Alliance. From 2014 to 2019, that money funded research right at the Wuhan lab. It included genetic experiments creating chimeric or hybridized coronavirus strains. Even crazier, EcoHealth proposed a project at DARPA in 2018 called Diffuse. The whole point of Diffuse was to actively insert furin cleavage sites into SARS-like viruses. Now, DARPA rejected it, but it proves that the exact scientific intent for that kind of modification was there just a year before the pandemic started.
All right, Section 5, and honestly, this might be the most controversial part of the whole release. Whistleblowers and alleged cover-ups.
So how was the intelligence community managing all these explosive findings internally? If we look at the timeline, you can see the tension building. May 2020, the Lawrence Livermore report highlights the lab's capabilities. August 2021, the ODNI releases that public assessment showing a divided intelligence community. But behind the scenes, well, in September 2023, a highly credible senior-level CIA whistleblower came to Congress with an absolutely stunning claim.
According to congressional testimony found in the document dump, this whistleblower alleges that a specific CIA COVID origins team had 7 members. 6 of them had concluded the virus likely came from the Wuhan lab. But, and here's the massive allegation, the whistleblower claims the CIA actually offered significant monetary incentives to those 6 experts to flip their conclusion to a natural zoonotic origin just to match the view of the 7th most senior member on the team.
Now, to be completely fair and objective here, we have to look at how the CIA responded, and they pushed back hard. A CIA spokesperson dismissed the testimony entirely, calling it, quote, dishonest political theater masquerading as a congressional hearing. The whole matter has now been sent over to the intelligence community's Inspector General.
And that brings us to our final section, number 6, a persistent global divide.
Even with all these new documents and updated assessments, the world is still basically fractured into 2 massive camps. On one side, you have the natural origin theory, an animal-to-human spillover at a market in Wuhan, which is backed by a lot of early scientific papers and some parts of U.S. intelligence. On the other side, the lab leak theory, an accidental release from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is now supported by the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Energy, and those early reports about the lab's capabilities.
And through all of this, what does China say? Well, their official stance hasn't budged one bit. Beijing vehemently disagrees with the new CIA assessment. They still point to the initial China-WHO joint team that called the lab leak extremely unlikely. Chinese officials are calling the lab leak theory pure politicization, and they continue to push the idea that the virus actually started outside of China entirely.
So I want to leave you with this final thought. We've traced the millions of dollars in U.S. funding, we've looked at intelligence analysts practically pulling their hair out over the science, and we've heard the explosive whistleblower allegations. But amidst all the divided intelligence, the intense geopolitical denials, and the real limits of global transparency, will the world ever truly agree on where COVID-19 came from? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep learning.